All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another trade recap. Again, today is going to be another gold trade recap. I've been pretty risk off in the AM sessions. If you guys have been trading AM this week, you know that this week's AM sessions have not been too clean. So, personally, I really don't think I've been missing out on much there. Been going just light risk, compounding, and taking executions overnight in gold where they've been presenting. So let's go ahead and get straight into the recap for today. So first things first, to start with gold here, we can see, we opened up at 6 p.m. right up here. So I'm just going to mark out that as our true day open for reference. So we opened up here at 6 p.m. and you can see that gold, was looking pretty bearish, right? Up here during the New York session here, I have the volume profile on for the 6 p.m. to 4 p.m. close, and then I have the New York session volume profile from the 8:30 to 4 p.m. close. So that's what we'll be referencing here, utilizing these white lines, which are your value area high, low, and point of control, and the black lines, which are the same, but just for the New York. So here into Asia, or just before Asia, around 7ish p.m., I see that the open is sending us lower, and we have previous day low here to target, being this 645 candle low. So this is the previous day low of the previous day's wick. And then I'll explain these further levels as I go forward in price. Now, aligned with this previous day low area here, we can see that we had the value area low for April 21st, which was Tuesday. So throughout the week, it's valid to be using your volume profiles from, the previous days throughout the week. Obviously, we're in a weekly candle, so, this is all intra-week price action. So what I notice here is we have this value area low here from, basically which was, which was Tuesday. And then here we also have some, areas from the New York session on Tuesday as well. So we have point of control from New York sitting here. We have the value area low sitting here as well. And then we have an interesting area here being this 15-minute BPR. And if we go to a higher time frame, you'll notice that this is also a huge 4-hour wick. So, pretty good area to look to target for lower. Let me remove. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here just before Asia's opening up, right? We're obviously on gold, in this kind of stair step movement downwards, right? We've been creating these, lower lows, lower highs, right? You can see here, this high here, we put in this high, a lower high. This low here compared to the low here, lower low, lower low compared to this here. So gold is, kind of been more so bearish than bullish. Realistically, the bullish moves up have been more retraces, and then we've been selling it back down. So back towards where my entry was here, you can see that, we're kind of rejecting that New York value area high. We come up here, you can see, this is a huge rejection wick here. I wouldn't, necessarily consider it to be a, rejection block. But when I do see huge rejection wicks like that, I do keep in mind, that price can potentially stall or, use it as a, point of resistance. So basically what I wanted to see here was just simple continuation down. Ideally, I'm seeing this move here, right? I'm seeing, okay, boom, we take out this low. So now what I want to see is, okay, are we going to take out this low and remain weak, or are we going to take this low out and, seek to flip? Now, obviously, previous day lows there, that's a significant draw on liquidity. And as I mentioned, we do have some of those, value areas in alignment with that as well. So let's go ahead and play out some price here. So essentially what I saw looking here into the current session, which was, the 6 p.m. open into Asia, I'm looking at the volume profile as it forms, right? We can see here, this is a fresh volume profile utilizing this price action. And what I notice here is a low volume node. So this candle here, 655, made a, quick move down, leaving behind this low volume node. And now I see that we have a 5-minute fair value gap. So go ahead and play out price. So we leave behind this 5-minute gap, right, as you can see. And now I want to see, okay, what happens if we end up retracing into this gap. So boom, we come up into this gap here, as you can see. Now I have fib levels here from the high to the body's low right here, as you can see. So you can see on the fib, we, wicked into equilibrium pretty much perfectly. I was contemplating taking entry there with the, with a similar stop, But the reason that I actually didn't end up taking entry was because on the 15-minute here, this leg was just completely bearish. We hadn't had a retrace on the 15 yet. And at this point here, with this candle, the 15 had another 5 minutes before creating that gap. So I wanted to see, if we're going to create that gap and then potentially move, potentially retrace up into it, still maintaining this low volume node. Realistically, this entry here wouldn't have been bad, but I did want to see a little more confirmation from price that we're not truly wanting to go higher. And this one candle, doesn't really give 100% conviction. So boom, we come up here, so there's 715 candle. Now we end up opening up that 15-minute gap right here, right? So now we've opened up this 15-minute gap. We tapped into it. So now I'm looking for us to continue holding lower. Now, at this time, point of control rests here, right? So I ideally don't want to see the market trading back above this point of control. I want us to hold below this and continue to flush lower, right? Continue to, push past this value area low for the session and ultimately push into, these levels that I have marked out. Now, let me go ahead and explain how I actually got the fibs, right? How I actually got the fibs up here to align down here, right? So here you can see this is your open, and all I did was take this opening manipulation up, right? You can see the open opened up, wicked higher, right? And then ended up coming lower ultimately, creating, manipulation, right? This can be seen as a manipulation. Now, the gold chart that I'm looking at here and the micros chart, they differ a bit. There's a little bit of, discorrelation sometimes with them. So my entry that you guys see here is not exact to the entry that I took. I'll pull up the accounts and actually show you guys the full entry precisely. But back to the difference between GC and MGC. So what I saw as well was we had this micro SMT here. So MGC had actually taken out this high while GC failed to do so. So that was one thing. So I just looked at this as a manipulation leg. I took the high of this leg down to this, where we kind of started, where the manipulation kind of started from, which is this wick low. And, these are levels I got. Now, you can see here, -1 to -1.5 are typically, areas where we would see price potentially retrace. It's not going to be a, reversal area. These are areas where price can hit and then retrace, back up or down to continue the move further. And then -2 to -2.5 is where we can see potential reversals begin to occur. And, if we continue to push lower, then around that -4, -4.5 is where we'll see, where we should see that price is overextended and, we're either going to consolidate or get a sharp reversal. So let's play out more price here. So boom. And let me make sure where I entered. So I entered off of the 720 candle. So yeah, I entered right here, as you can see. So at this point here, this is a candle that, I like now. Now we tapped into that 15, right? We tapped into, OTE, of the range or of this little leg down. We tapped into OTE, right? 618. So everything here in this area looks good. So I went ahead and took entry here. And I basically planned to go break even around this 0.27 area towards this April 21st value area low. Was pretty much just looking at it discretionally, pretty much wanting to see, okay, boom, if we flush this 0.27 area, ideally we come towards this value area low, go break even around that -2, and then continue to push into -2.5. That aligns with previous day low perfectly. So this is where I took entry from. So let's play out price now as we go forward. So price is a bit choppy through this area. And then we end up making this valid 15-minute rejection wick. So I'm going to remove this gap just for clarity. So we make this rejection wick. I'm also going to remove this low volume node over here. So at this point here, right, we're technically holding this low volume node, right? This low volume node is being respected. We're also holding below that New York value area low, which is a little different on the 5-minute. I have it marked out on the 15, so it's a little bit discorrelated between the time frames, but we're holding below that New York value area low at this point as well, right? And then, we're also not really seeing strength above this point of control for our current session, trading below the value area high for the current session, and, have levels below us to target. So now I see this 15-minute rejection block. I mark that out. At this point here, I'm thinking price is going to start displacing, but also Asia session at this point had not technically started. So part of me was in this trade kind of thinking, okay, I should have waited for the Asia session to open because we could make some kind of manipulation and then make the move, as that's the actual kill zone. So play price out here. So we come into that 15-minute rejection block here, right? Tap into CE of that perfectly, and then we see a sharp move down to the downside. So off of this move here, on MGC, we had actually tapped this 737.1 area, and that's where I TP'd on my Lucids. So I TP'd on Lucids a little bit early just to secure the green day and request payouts at the end of today. So just wanted to get that out of the way. So went ahead and closed the Lucids there. And then for my top steps, I actually held them down for the full draw liquidity. So at this time, I went break even on all my accounts, as MGC had taken the level that I wanted to see. So if we play out price some more, as you can see as well, this is into the Asia Open. So Asia opens, right? This, rejection block ends up holding into the open. We use it and we displace. Now there was also, I think, like some news or something. I think it was Tesla having their earnings call a little bit later into the evening, that essentially created, was a catalyst for this move. Obviously, I'm not anticipating that. So I full closed my top steps here at this previous day low. As you can see here, for about 400 per account. And then, here's the execution, right? Off of that 720 candle, right? Entered pretty much like at the displacement bottom of that candle, right? Stops at the, internal high here, and then targeted that previous day low, which was this black line here. So I didn't anticipate this move to continue that strong. I'll play out more price here so you guys can see. But yeah, so we come down right into that -2.5, that previous day low. I mean, for me, that's just the make sense area to be getting out of the market. I mean, realistically, I could have held maybe for the BPR, could have held a little bit lower, but I held for just a clear session draw. And then if I play price out further here, you guys can see we come down into that -4.5 area. We tap, into that 15-minute BPR right here. That's also the 4-hour wick, that 4-hour huge wick that I was talking about earlier in the video. And then you can see the insane sharp reversal off of that. Now, obviously, this is to do with the volatility behind, the news that we had come out. But you can see how news essentially, can still use levels, but, we just have way more heightened volatility. But, you'll typically see news deliver us to levels, deliver us from levels. And yeah, I mean, this was pretty interesting. A part of me was a little bit irritated, obviously, that I didn't hold further on gold. Holding further for this was another, 18 points to 20-something points. Obviously, that's in hindsight. I definitely wish I would have held the Lucids a bit longer, but I definitely just wanted to secure the payout. So the Lucids ended up doing, let me pull it up here. So the Lucids ended up doing like 240 per account. So right here. So I'll be requesting a payout at the end of the day on those. Just wanted to get those out of the way. Now, once we get into the second payout cycle, I may look to scale up risk on that. But I just want to get those out of the way. And then the top step accounts that I have still need one more trading day. So I'll either be looking to get that tonight or the AM session. Ideally, I'll be able to catch something on gold tonight, but we'll see. But yeah, this should break down a little bit more on how I'm using volume profiles. I'm trying to break it down to the best of my ability and keep it as simple as I can for you guys. But yeah, let me go back here. But yeah, so, basically the basis for this, right? I'm looking at the 6 p.m. open. I'm not entertaining price off the 6 p.m. open. I'm not going to lie. I did want to kind of enter this displacement move here off of that, wick down. But I didn't want to, entertain the market too close into that 6 p.m. open. So I decided to let some structure form closer to Asia. I've been, really taking majority of these trades on gold during the actual Asia session. Last night, I just decided to, take it a little bit earlier than the Asia session by, about 40 minutes, which was a bit risky. I could have easily got manipulated. In hindsight, you could say it might have been better to wait, until the 7:55. We got that rejection block manipulation. But, I mean, yeah, everything around this area looked pretty good. I had my stop in an area that made sense. Realistically, I wouldn't want to see price trade back, above this area. Like I mentioned, we had that New York Valley area low we were holding below. And, just overall, the structure here looked good for this area to hold with the clear levels that we had lower. But, yeah, this was about, it wasn't a 1.9. It was much lower than that. It was about a 1.67, so like almost a 1.7R trade. Again, would have been very nice if I would have been able to hold down further. But, on top of this, realistically, my standard deviation level is aligned around that previous day low. So I was pretty content. And I mean, I would not have anticipated this move down regardless, no matter what. I didn't have any further levels down here I wanted to see, at least for, profit taking. So that, that is what it is. Now, on MGC, like I said, the levels here are a little bit different. So here's that high that I was talking about where we kind of created the SMT with the minis. So you can see the standard deviation becomes a bit different. So on MGC, you can see your standard deviation -2 to -2.5 come down a bit further into like that 722-ish area. But typically I'm running off of the minis chart. The minis chart, when it comes down to NQ, ES, gold, whatever it is, you always want to be referencing that chart for your levels mainly. And then the micros chart, you're just simply mirroring. So I went with, the levels that I had marked out here. Also, these levels made more sense. They were more aligned to, this value area low I had marked and also the previous day low. So this made complete sense to me. And then again, on any other given day, we could very well have come down into this previous day low and started to reverse. We simply just had news that sent us, down very fast and sent us back up just as fast. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much breaks down the recap. You guys are going to notice that, the trades that you're going to be seeing me recap are really going to be kind of similar, like through and through for the most part. Again, my analysis is always the same for my trades, and the entry model is really the only thing that can change. I may just enter off simple displacement. I may enter off, an actual confluence like a CISD, an inversion, whatever the case. But, I'm really just looking at, price to react at the levels that I have marked, and then looking to see confirmation off of those reactions to take my trades. And then obviously the most important part would be having a clear draw, clear areas for us to draw to. When we're trading at areas like this in price, and your nearest draws higher up here somewhere, right? But you have draws lower that are, more probable, that are much closer. You're going to look to frame, the shorts here. You're not going to look to frame longs at this point, unless given, structure that, flips all this bearish leg and then, looks to seek continuation higher. But at this point, it's very safe to, be bearish. I feel like, we come down, right? We first off break these lows, we close them, we don't sweep and, immediately start to buy up nicely. We close them. And then what do? We come into these confluences up here and, we're failing to go higher. We're failing to go higher, right? And, I'm just looking at these rejections. We're failing to go higher. We're holding inside of these, bearish areas, and we have the clear draws lower. So really overall a solid trade. This trade I held for about 44 minutes, I believe it was, something like that. So not as bad as the previous 2 nights on gold where I held for pretty much 2 hours straight. But this one I didn't really hold as far as the other 2 trades, and also price moved much faster this time. But yeah, pretty simple. Again, just using volume profile and referencing the value area highs, lows, point of control areas to kind of, get an idea of what price can do. And then aligning, the simple ICT structure I've always used to those levels, and, using fibs and deviations as well to kind of put some more conviction behind it. But yeah, I mean, you guys will hopefully be able to see some more recaps like this. Hopefully the market, continues to clear up, continues to give us some opportunities. Obviously, price action has been a lot of, a lot of chaos with, all this conflict and everything. So ideally we could start clearing up. I can get more videos out for you guys, hopefully. Another thing I wanted to mention here was this, this little retrace up as well into the 15-minute rejection block here. If you took this, little leg down here, the fibs, you can see that 7.9 fib ultimately held, perfectly with the rejection block as well. So that would have been an, all right area maybe for a, re-entry, and then, scale stops down into this high. But, like I said, just keeping risk low. So I only went in this with 4 micros and had about I think it was like a $280 stop, $280 stop. So really not bad at all. But yeah, I mean, that covers it for the recap. Hopefully, I can catch something on NASDAQ here during the AM. I'm sure you guys would much rather see NASDAQ recaps, as that's what you guys mainly trade. But, I'm just taking advantage of the market where I can. Realistically, gold has been, seeing nice overnight moves. And NQs have been pretty hard to read during the AM sessions. Some discorrelation with ES and everything like that. A lot of like tweets coming out during the AM as well. So just a little harder to trade. But as always, guys, that's going to be it for the recap. Hopefully you guys gain some value out of this. If you do, be sure to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be sure to keep dropping these for you guys. And yep, see you in the next video. Later.